morning, everyone, and welcome to the Bonneville Power Administration End-of-Year Quarterly Business Review for fiscal year 2020. I'm John Harrison, Acting BPA Administrator, and I really appreciate you taking the time for today's forum. I want you to feel free to submit questions to the host during the webinar, and we will try to answer as many of them as we can at the end of the presentation. And as a reminder, this meeting is being recorded. So let me just start off by saying, despite the challenging conditions FY2020 had in store for us, Bonneville continued to deliver on its mission and strategic goals. Obviously, implementing a strategic plan would be challenging under even the best conditions, so I'm extremely proud of our workforce and how they performed, especially when you consider the uncertainty and vulnerability we have all felt throughout this pandemic. Now, despite most of us working remotely, we have been able to come together to address the economic slowdown and the impacts on our customers. Moreover, when faced with what has been really the worst wildfire season on record, we were able to rise to the challenge once again. And that's something I'll touch on a little bit later in the presentation. Now, here at BPA, we always plan to prepare for a variety of contingencies, and all of that planning and preparation paid off this year. We were ready to respond quickly and effectively to rapidly changing conditions. Most importantly, we also remain responsive to our customers, and over the next hour, you'll hear many examples of our resilience. For example, in the middle of the pandemic, we were able to complete the multi-year, multi-agency Columbia River System Operations Environmental Review. I believe the result will benefit fish while providing clean, dependable, affordable power to the people of the Northwest. We also acted quickly to suspend the financial reserve surcharge when our customers asked for rate relief as COVID-19 took hold of our region. We achieved our financial goals, we met our grid modernization milestones, and issued a wildfire mitigation plan as well. And even though many of our transmission projects were put on hold for portions of the year to protect our crews from COVID-19, transmission services exceeded its target for a number of units installed. We did all of this while maintaining a safe power and transmission services to our customers and the people of the Northwest. Now, our exceptional performance is reflected on slide 3, where you can see we met 11 of our 13 key performance indicators and both of our key strategic initiatives. Now, throughout the pandemic, the priority for BPA leadership has been to protect the health and safety of our workforce while preserving our ability to provide critical power and transmission services to the region. Most of our workforce remains on telework status and will remain so at least through the end of January based on what we're seeing in the recent COVID-19 data and trends. But our field crews have returned to work as of September and continue to ramp up on projects we first put on hold in March. But we have to emphasize that this is not a race. We are not ramping up, not catching up. We stress the importance of safety, so that way we don't put our employees or our ability to deliver on power in harm's way by trying to move too quickly. As you can see, we met our safety performance target this year with an injury frequency rate below our ceiling of 0.90. But the reality is too many of our members of our workforce were injured this year. Near the end of the year, we saw an uptick in workplace accidents as field crews returned to work. We remain committed to identifying hazards and correcting or mitigating them to prevent future injuries. And that is really consistent with our core value of safety. Now I'll share a brief update on our overall agency performance. We met all but 2 of our KPIs this year, the Federal Hydro Forced Outage Factor and the System Average Interruption Duration Index for high voltage lines. Now, the Fed Hydro target is red as a result of an extended force outage at Grand Coulee Dam and 2 forced outages at John Day Dam that were originally marked as scheduled outages in error. Now, Power is working with Corps and Reclamation to assure that the work is being done to bring all of those units back online. Additionally, BPA is continually working with the Corps and Reclamation to improve data quality. These outages do not jeopardize our ability to serve our Tier 1 load or our preference customers. The SAIDI, our high voltage target, is red due to outages that occurred during the winter storm season in Q2, as well as outages in Q4 caused by wildfires, which I'll discuss a little bit more later. The fact that we met all of our other targets despite the challenges of FY2020 is remarkable. I'm particularly impressed with our grid modernization progress. We are green on both of our grid modernization strategic initiatives. This means we completed 98% of our project milestones for project in delivery and complete phases. The milestone we missed has already been completed in fiscal year 2021. And we are also green on our finance metric for grid modernization, with 92% of our IPR expense budget spent for projects in the deliver phase. So now I'll turn it over to our Chief Financial Officer, Michelle Maneri, who will cover our financial performance results.
Thank you, John. If you go to the next slide, please. I was just thinking back, last year at this time, we were actually looking at a dashboard with some red on it due to kind of that weird storm that hit late March, early April, where we had to be buying in a very high market. But this year is a very different story. As you can see, we are green on all our financial performance indicators, and I'll dive into the nuances behind this performance in the following slide. Despite a year of turbulence and economic uncertainty, we ended with a pretty good financial result. So when we look at the next slide, the agency net revenues. This is our waterfall chart. The left side is the rate case. The right side is actuals. You can see we had a pretty good year. The rate case target was $12 million. Our end of year performance was $246 million. The drivers of this are shown in the following boxes. So the first one, the $60 million, you see there's 60 with the green box. The IPR expenses are $60 million lower than the rate case due to delays in fish and wildlife project work because of COVID, lower fed hydro spending, and lower energy efficiency expenses. It's all COVID related. And so those, as many of you have probably seen in your own utilities, we saw a delay in project work, especially on the ground, from the COVID this year. Now, however, what we've decided this year is we'll be carrying forward $27 million in the expense budget into 21, primarily for fed hydro and energy efficiency in order to help catch up on the delayed COVID work. And so we will be taking part of those $246 million of net revenues, 27 million of them, and applying them to the 21 budget. And so those organizations can catch up. Go to the next box, which is a thin little red box of $1 million. That was other expenses. This is primarily made up of variable non-IPR expenses, and it's $1 million due to actually higher power purchases, but that was offset by lower third-party GTA wheeling costs. And so that actually netted out to about $1 million. If you go to the third item, depreciation, amortization, and accretion. Always hard for me to say it for some reason. And this is a non-cash cost. It's $42 million lower than the rate case, mainly due to lower Columbia Generating Station amortization expense than forecasted in the rate case. As we've noted before, remember this is the topic that was connected with significant accounting changes made this fiscal year to our non-federal generation and regulatory assets. These assets, as you recall before, CGS used to swing all over. They are now amortized on a straight line basis instead of varying every period. And we expect to better align rate case and actuals in the future rate periods. This variance, just to note, will have no impact on reserve levels or our risk adjustment mechanisms like the reserve surcharge, cost recovery adjustment clause, or reserve distribution clause. This is one that we had to forecast it in the rate case before we made the adjustments. We're off a little, and so this is the $42 million difference here. Go to the next one, net interest expense. I believe, like many of you are seeing, net interest expense is about $4 million less than the rate case due to lower than expected interest rates. Then the fifth one, the granddaddy of them all. The operating revenues are up by $129 million, and this is largely due to power. And power, the main drivers here are the $21 million of the reserve charge, higher demand revenues, and actually the majority of it comes from secondary sales from the summer. And I'll get to this as we look at the individual business lines. And but however, transmission did actually help contribute to this too as well. They are $8 million over the rate case due to higher point-to-point short-term network revenues in the fourth quarter. That was the summer. Due to higher hydro and prices, and higher NT loads as resulted in a warmer than expected summer. So combining all these core variances drivers together brings the agency net revenues for the year to $246 million. Okay, let's look at the individual business lines. So the next slide shows you Power's expenses. So if you look here, remember the solid is IPR, the hashed mark is the non-IPR. So Power ended the year having $103 million less in total expenses than the rate case due to three main areas I've touched on before: energy efficiency, fish and wildlife, and generating partners. So Fish and Wildlife had a $19 million underspend due to delays in project work for COVID and wildfire. $14 million is due from the generating partners, also COVID work. And then $7 million from energy efficiency, same reason. So those are your IPR expenses that were lower. Your non-IPR expenses were the ancillary expenses, third-party GTA wheeling, and lower amortization, which was partially offset by higher power purchases due to higher spill conditions. So Power came in with a healthy margin of expenses below the rate case. So when we turn to look at revenues then, Power's revenues, you have the same thing on the other side. So you have $105 million higher in the rate case due to three main areas: reserve surcharge, secondary sales, and 4-H-10C credits. So of that $105 million, $21 million was collected from the surcharge, which, remember, was suspended in July. We collected a bit of higher demand revenues, and the majority of it is from higher secondary sales over the summer months. And we were very blessed this year to have just the right snow melt and the management of water, and so we saw a great August where the majority of these came in. And also, just to note, 4-H-10C credits, as you remember, we started off dry last year at the beginning, and so we had about $9 million of higher 4-H-10C credits in the rate case because of that dry fall due to power purchases in that quarter. So then that brings us to net revenues. So next slide. So Power's lower expenses, $100 million, and higher revenues result in about $255 million for the fiscal year, which is $208 million better than our rate case projections. So now, as you can see, let's turn to transmission. Transmission actually also had a good year. Transmission expenses were $21 million less than our rate case projection in total. The decrease in non-IPR costs, which is where the underspend came from, were primarily driven by lower reimbursable expenses, about $4 million, and then $2 million lower depreciation amortization and $15 million lower in interest expense. Same theme. The IPR, as you heard me talk about in third quarter, and I think I might have said it in second quarter, those were coming in hot due to wildfires and COVID and extra expenses. But as you can see, we ended the year exactly on. And so the IPR expenses exactly equaled the rate case projections. So let's then turn to revenues. So transmission revenues were $8 million above rate case. This is primarily due to the summer that we saw higher point-to-point short-term network revenues in the fourth quarter from the higher hydro and prices, and people are moving power. And then we also had a bit of a higher NT load service as a result of warmer than normal weather this summer. So you put them all together, transmission's lower expenses and revenues resulted in a revenue of negative $7 million for the fiscal year, which is actually $29 million better than our rate case projections. Remember, we were in settlement. We thought we planned on using reserves, and so we used less reserves than we thought. Both business lines had stellar years, and so that put us in the position we are today. Let's look at capital. Capital has a little bit of a different story. The agency rate case capital expectation was $847 million there on the left, and then you see the waterfall, and we ended at $609 million. Let me break that down a bit. The Fed Hydro, the $80 million you see in the first green block, second block over from the left, is $80 million below rate case. We started out a bit lower just starting the year, but it really got hit by COVID. And so the Corps really got hit, and so you see lower expenditures by about $80 million. If you go to transmission, the next item, then remember transmission includes facilities, IT, security, fleet, and environment. So we wrap them all together. That is $158 million below rate case due to several factors. So the first one I've talked about before, where we had the transmission sustain and expand program prioritization in late FY2018, which shifted some of the prioritizations. And so that shifted part of it. And then we had in facilities, we had about $27 million below rate case because of reprioritization. And we shifted a new maintenance headquarters at Covington and delayed construction of the Ross Technical Services building. So we actually moved some of those items out of 20 into a subsequent year. So let's go to the next slide. What does this mean for reserves? So if we look at our financial reserves threshold, if you look along the bottom, we actually, I'm very happy to say, we have 113 days cash for the agency if you bottom left. And if you go across, power is 95. I am so excited to see them actually in, just kind of smack dab in that white zone, the no man's land, the target where we're supposed to land. So power, having that wonderful year, put them in our financial reserve targets by business line, put them in their target zone, which means that there's no crack or RDC trigger on the power side, and the surcharge has actually been suspended, but as we come through the year, it actually would not have triggered regardless. And so great position power is kind of ending the year with. Let's look at transmissions. Same story we've seen before. Transmission is 160 days cash on hand, which means, can you believe this, at this level, the RDC has triggered for about, probably about 80 million. This amount and the planned use for it, remember this is one where the administrator has discretion, will be discussed at full at the QBR technical workshop this Thursday. So we will dive into those details. So going to the next slide. Oops, sorry. So let me go to talk about some other financial updates before I turn it back over to John. So as a reminder, our annual report is now available on BPA.gov website, which puts this all together and talks about our targets and our metrics and in detailed results. We also, as many of you know, are going through getting ready for the BP22 and TC22 rate cases. With that, the IPR process was completed and the closeout report was published September 30th, and expect to have an IPR2 in the early spring of 21. High-level public process for BP and TC22 schedules. December is the initial proposal is published. March is the close of comment. June is the draft ROD, and July is the final ROD. So that's just a high level of things that we're going to be looking at. Also, I want to give a plug for the QBR technical workshop this Thursday. And let me tell you a few of the topics. We're going to be doing a deeper dive into the financial performance of the businesses and the agency. We're going to talk about RDC trigger analysis. So we'll go through that calculation and the proposed use, which will start a 2-week comment period on the proposed use. We also will talk about IPR2, budget carryover, and then FY21 outlook. We will hit highly the kind of a high-level strategic cost management initiative and what it is and what's launching there. And then we will also, of course, talk about our grid modernization project. Given the exciting events, I will turn it back over to John.
Thanks a lot, Michelle, for a really great financial presentation and some strong results this year. Well done by you and your team. I'd like to talk about a number of other big stories that have taken place within our organization during 2020. I'd like to start off with, what we've been doing around grid modernization, our key strategic initiative. As you know, we are halfway through the grid modernization key strategic initiative, and as I said earlier, we ended the year with both metrics green, thanks to, I really feel, great portfolio and project management that we've put in place for this effort. The progress and extended telework. Construction stand-downs and limited access to control centers impacted project schedules and have delayed implementation of some systems. We've also had to create new processes to safely onboard grid modernization vendors during our extended telework to ensure grid mod projects could continue to deliver. Despite these challenges, we kicked off 5 new grid modernization projects to enable our participation in the Western energy imbalance market. These projects successfully moved through the scoping into the deliver phase in the last year. We also completed 5 projects and met more than 50 major milestones this year. The portfolio management and executive oversight have allowed us to prioritize deliverables and ensure project teams have the resources they need to really succeed on this project. And I would say our grid modernization project teams have found innovative ways to make sure that they're delivering this important initiative on time and on budget for the region while ensuring the health and safety of our staff. We continue to move forward on our EIM policies and implementation. We wrapped up our Phase 3 policy discussion in September and issued a subset of our final EIM policy decisions in the Phase 3 decision document. Our next phase is the rates and tariff proceedings that are expected to start in December. In these proceedings, we will finalize the remaining EIM policy decisions that will impact the rates and tariff. Phase 4 is an important step for us before making the final decision if we should join the EIM. We also kicked off our EIM implementation outreach. This covers issues on how BPA is implementing the EIM that is not determined in the rate and tariff process, such as systems and tools BPA is adding and how BPA is joining the EIM as a whole. We look forward to the future engagements on our EIM implementation efforts as we continue to make progress on this important goal. I'd also like to note that BPA has not made a final decision on the EIM. We are about a year away from making that significant decision and will require a lot more discussion among all parties affected and serious consideration over the next several months. So just want to make note of that, we are still going through the progressions of making a final decision. We also know governance is extremely important, and BPA is actively involved in the review of the EIM's governance through our involvement on the Governance Review Committee. This is an important foundation for BPA's participation and the addition of market functions in the future. And the bottom line is I want all of you to know that I'm fully committed to ensuring whatever decision we make is in the customer's best interest. So it will be transparent, and we will weigh a number of factors to make sure that we make a decision that is certainly in the best interest of our customers. I'd also add that we do not expect to change our overall approach to the ISO markets given the recent California capacity shortages this summer. However, we do believe that market design flaws that we discover based on recent events will inform our position on market design elements. So that's also something that's very important to note that we're learning as we move forward. We are also working closely with other EIM entities on evaluating the ISO's EDAM market initiative, which would extend the ISO's day-ahead market to EIM entities. We're exploring if EDAM could provide value for our clean, carbon-free capacity and ensure our transmission system is appropriately compensated. We submitted joint comments with EIM entities in the ISO stakeholder process on November 12th, along with our own set of supplemental comments. No firm dates have been set thus far for the future of this process due to the focus on the impacts of the summer heat wave and other ongoing ISO stakeholder processes. Several analytical efforts are underway, and the results will inform our position on potential market elements. We intend to continue collaboration with EIM entities and our customers and stakeholders on all of this work. Turning our attention to resource adequacy, it's been a really hot topic throughout the West in 2020, and BPA will continue to engage in the Northwest Power Pool Resource Adequacy Program to help develop a detailed plan. The need to continue these discussions was highlighted this summer with the heat wave and blackouts in California, so a robust resource adequacy program in the Northwest will support reliability as we transition into a cleaner regional energy portfolio. We also are participating in the interim program and have provided energy to another entity when called upon. So we look forward to continuing to engage in this program development. Also, for several years, a key issue for BPA, particularly Power Services, has been the multi-agency Columbia River Operations Environmental Review. We concluded this effort in September with the CRSO Joint Record of Decision. I really believe that the result is a product that will benefit fish while providing clean, dependable, affordable power to the people of the Northwest. This new operation demonstrates the type of trade-offs and balance necessary to enhance the operations of the system for both fish and power, and our analysis show that if we continue to manage our costs and leverage additional revenue opportunities, we can limit or avoid financial impacts for ratepayers, as a whole. So related to this, BPA will be holding a second integrated program review in early 2021 to address CRSO impacts as well as any changing economic conditions due to the pandemic. Now, as we implement the CRSO operation, we are faced with the prospect of litigation, and we are disappointed with this development, but we remain committed to working with our federal, state, tribal, and other non-governmental partners to mitigate the impacts of the system on fish and wildlife in the region. As we communicated throughout the CRSO effort, we never intended this release of the EIS to end the regional conversation. Now, the states of Washington, Oregon, Idaho, Montana are engaged in a process with the goal of taking a broader, more collaborative view on regional solutions that can perhaps improve conditions for fish and wildlife. So we're interested in exploring solutions with the states, our tribal partners, customers, and others who are invested in fish and wildlife recovery and mitigation efforts, and we believe that we have valuable expertise to share on that topic. At this stage, though, there's a lot more we need to understand and consider before we know what our role might be. But we should know more in the upcoming weeks and months as that develops. Now, as you may recall, in FY2020, we completed our first virtual integrated program review. With our customers' input, we published final spending levels for the next rate period in line with our strategic goal to keep spending levels at or below the rate of inflation. These IPR spending levels will be key inputs into the rate case, and we'll be kicking that off in December with the initial rate proposal. That's concurrently scheduled for early December. For power, BPA has presented the possibility of about anywhere between a 0 to 1% average rate increase, coupled with options for revenue financing or reducing BPA's dependence on secondary revenue or cost recovery. BPA is refining our approach for addressing secondary revenues in preparation for the initial proposal, retaining focus on balance of long-term and short-term interests, customer input to minimize local rate impacts, and needing to address emergent borrowing authority challenges that we're facing, and as well as opportunities to improve Power's leverage position. So we're taking all of those things in consideration as we enter into those discussions. I will also note that improvements in BPA's cash position have reduced the probability for the financial reserves policy surcharge triggering during the rate period. Our current long-term power contracts will expire in 2028, and understandably, our power customers are particularly interested in the Provider of Choice initiative, through which we will develop the policies and contracts BPA will offer beyond 2028. In October, we released a summary of customers' views to date on post-2028 contracts and rate structure. We plan to work with customers through the remainder of the calendar year 2020 to further hone in on key Provider of Choice themes and interests. And in early 2021, the focus will turn towards the development of a concept paper, which will also consist of extensive outreach and partnering with our customers. As always, we look forward to thoughtful conversations, collaboration, and healthy policy debates in the coming years as the region advances towards what is the next phase of BPA's policy and contracts, extending the Northwest rich history of providing low-cost, reliable, and low-carbon public power for the region. Now, I'll turn kind of my attention towards the topic of BP22 rate case for a moment and update you on where we're at on the transmission rates. As we shared at our workshop in September, we are facing the possibility of an 8% rate increase for transmission. At that time, we also shared our concern about transmission's net borrowing position. Transmission's business is capital intensive and needs access to capital to continue to invest in the grid and ensure it remains a reliable, valuable asset for the region. It's important to take steps now so that we avoid future negative impacts. Any revenue financing that we include in rates will help us towards solving that capital access issue, but it won't be the only solution. After the rate case concludes, our finance group will continue to lead discussions on options on how we can solve this issue for the foreseeable future. In terms of our transmission projects, social distancing protocols, along with 2 separate construction stoppages due to the pandemic in the middle of our construction season, hampered our efforts. We also experienced major fires that drew heavily on our available resources. And despite these challenges, we ended up the year at 255 major units installed, above our transmission target for the year. On capital spend, we came in at $371 million, meeting our transmission target. And we accomplished this work while remaining below our safety targets, coming in with an incident frequency rate of 1.1 per 100,000 hours of work in transmission. Our annual ceiling is 1.3. Now I'd like to touch a little bit on wildfires. The intensity and the scale and devastation of this year's wildfire season was unlike anything we've ever seen. It's, like I said, once in a generation. These devastating events impacted many of our customers and the communities, some of whom are still repairing and rebuilding. Fortunately, we were able to maintain service to most of our customers and repair our damaged equipment sooner than what we really expected. And most importantly, we were able to perform that restoration work safely and without injuries to our crews. Transmission equipment in 7 of BPA's 13 transmission maintenance districts were impacted by fires. BPA had 38 lines out of service over the course of the fires. Some of these outages were due to fire damage. Others were removed from service so that firefighters could do work on or near BPA right-of-ways, or to allow BPA crews to safely work on some of the lines and around the right-of-ways. Back in June, we had released our very timely wildfire mitigation plan. With concerns about the increase in frequency and severity of wildfires, we developed this multi-pronged plan that leverages what we feel our leading veg management program and elevates wildfire mitigation and our asset planning strategy. The goal of the plan is to ensure we continue to serve our utility customers safely and effectively when wildfires threaten BPA lines or substations, as well as to reduce the likelihood of BPA equipment being a source of ignition. While it served us well during the challenging and intense wildfire season, we continue to apply the lessons that we learned during the wildfire season to further strengthen an already sound wildfire mitigation plan. Now, that wraps up the state of the business review, but before I close, I want to draw your attention to our FY2020 annual report, which was just released yesterday. I also encourage you to take a look at our strategic plan progress update published last month. Notably, in this midpoint review, BPA has reassessed and reaffirmed our strategic goals and objectives and feel that they are the right ones to ensure we succeed in our vision. It highlights accomplishments over the last couple of years, some of which you've heard about today, but it also discusses some of the focus areas that will be important to many of you in the years ahead. I'd like to also close by just really communicating how humbling it is to have the opportunity to lead Bonneville during this time. As an agency, we're eager to move forward and excited to see what will happen in FY2021. But we also look forward to partnering with the region and continuing to meeting the challenges of this, I mean, really, truly rapidly changing landscape. So, you know, for me, it's just an honor and privilege to really lead such a professional and engaged workforce. And as you can see, they are just doing a tremendous job in achieving results for all of our customers in the region. So that concludes our end-of-year review. We'd like to now see if we have any questions that we can answer.
Hi, John. So far, just one question has come in, and it's for Michelle. Michelle, the question was, what are the topics that will be discussed during the IPR2?
So this Thursday, Jesse Kent will roll out a draft kind of topics and schedule. Right now, the topics we have are any CRO, CRSO, EIS, any impacts from that, any COVID. We said we'd further, if anything, with the region or the economy, any COVID impacts we see going into 21, as well as we heard loud and clear from last week's customer workshop, capital. So capital, not only expense, but some of the capital forecasts, especially on the transmission side. So that's what we have so far. On Thursday, we'll be talking through what we've seen so far and get feedback on that plan.
Okay, so far there are no other questions. Thank you, Michelle, for giving that answer. And thank you everybody else for joining the meeting.
All right, so thanks a lot.
And with that, I just wanted to give a final plug for this Thursday's workshop, technical workshop. We will have SMEs, as well as I will be there as well in virtual realms, and to answer a lot of these questions and get your feedback. So with that, the dates are up there. Have a great day. Thank you.